What's a good one?
Whilst you're thinking, you can update it. Welcome to the randInt podcast.
Yeah.
You can think in the background, man. I gotta sleep.
All right, we'll multitask.
Okay. So we're up to episode 6. This is further than I thought we'd get going to.
This is true.
And for once, you're pestering me about doing an episode. So clearly you're liking the podcast so far.
Well, we get bonuses because sleep deprived and Ramadan related.
Well, this is true. So let's begin our segment. So how are you?
What's that? How are you?
So this is day 7 of Ramadan. And for those who don't know, it's that Islamic holy month where people do silly things like get up really early and not eat during any daylight hours, so daybreak till sunset, which means I've been up since about 4:30 in the morning, and it's 9:15 at night at the moment after a full day's work. And I've broken fast. It was a bit late because I literally, the case finished, the operation finished, and I got the patient out to recovery, like a 30-second window of breaking fast there. So I was like, okay. And this was a hospital that has no food. So I had to run across the road to the other hospital, grab a coffee and a potato cake, which salt plus a diuretic is not the best way to break a fast. Can I just put it out there?
Surely you just have some cookies in your pocket ready to go at all times.
Yeah, but that requires you to think. So there's only 4 cases. I thought we'd be done. I'd go to my parents' place because it was near there. But that didn't happen because I got there a bit late. But then literally I waited nearly an hour, and the patient hadn't been admitted. They were still sitting outside in their CVs, just waiting for processing for paperwork. So me and the nurse just went and did it because nothing was happening. So
where to go?
Well, they just had a really busy morning. I mean, it wasn't. It just literally they were just overrunning on a huge factor. But anyway, so hence I had nothing. So I had to run across the road, and I was like, well, I can either eat crappy cafeteria food, or what do I really want? I want a coffee. And I was like,
and a potato cake, apparently.
Well, when you're a bit hungry, you want something. I had to drive back, right? I needed some sort of carby goodness without. That was
when you're in the supermarket and hungry, it's never a bad end result.
Well, exactly. And I everything else was chocolate brownies, cakes, muffins, and the sugar crash, especially on Ramadan, is far worse than having. But it was actually semi-sensible. If I wasn't going to have a full cafeteria, and there was literally nothing else, there was cafeteria grade butter chicken and fried rice, which by the time I finished it, I would have felt disgusting anyway. So I came home and had an actual proper meal, but I may be very thirsty.
So how long does it usually take you to settle into a bit of a groove?
For Ramadan, no. So in the past, it used to take me about 3 days. I don't know if it's because I'm now an old man, or I gotta say, man, consultant roster is far more random than the Ridge roster. The Ridge roster was random, but it was predictably random. You do night shift, you do evenings, then you rotate, but you always do the same blocks, right? Another roster is you're on call one night, the other night I was meant to start a case at 9:00 and be done by 9:30, come home, sleep. Nah, we didn't get started until 11. So I didn't get home until midnight. So then I was up at 4:30 and I was half asleep in the middle of the day. That stuffed me up for the next day. And these little progressions are just bouncing around everywhere. So I can't really settle into anything. That's partly the problem. So normally by day 7, I'm fine. But that led on to the weekend. And on the week, on Sunday, I slipped in because before Ramadan, I booked a staycation because I had all these travel vouchers that were expiring.
And that sounds like me.
Yeah. So literally booked it. Rocked up at midnight because this was also when a friend invited me over for an iftar party. So by the time got home, got to the hotel, it was midnight check-in. So I got up at 4:30, ate, and then slept in, and then basically stuffed everything up for today. because I couldn't get to sleep until midnight last night, and then I woke up at 4:30. And I was like, what's the point of going to sleep? I'll just
Yeah, I'm sure you'll readjust.
Yeah, so it's been 7 days, but it's not too bad. Like I'm not hungry anymore, and even though I'm thirsty right now, most of the day I'm fine. Like the headaches are gone, the caffeine deficiency is gone. Just a bit tired, but like everyone.
It sounds like you guys are just doing like the OG of intermittent fasting.
Yeah, man, it's like 100 years of intermittent fasting. Yeah.
So really, you're just jumping on the bandwagon that everybody else is jumping on.
Hey, we started the bandwagon.
Sure.
We started the bandwagon, and also we weeded out everyone with bad kidneys. It's like, yeah, because remember, this started in the desert. So if they had some sort of kidney disease, they're gone.
I see. Eugenics started early. You mentioned that you used some of your travel vouchers. Where did you use these?
So it's actually on the Sunday Surprise newsletter. So that was
you can subscribe. Anyway, continue.
Sunday. What was I going to say? What did you ask? Oh, the travel vouchers. Yeah. So it started about a month ago, I suppose. Like I got taken out to a nice hotel for my birthday, and then random friends rocked up. But you were obviously already in Perth. Then, yeah. So basically, I'd totally forgotten about all Amex credit card point hacking stuff because we've been in lockdown. So I logged in, realized that was the day that the travel vouchers expired, and I had $800 worth. So this was at the beginning of the day. I'm like, all right, I've got to go to work. Came home at midnight, and it expires at midnight. So in 15 minutes, I looked up any close hotels that I'd ever wanted to visit and didn't check anything else except for does it have a view, and booked it. So one was they're both across the river, so it's like within 500-meter distance. But it was also kind of nice because these are all places that I would never ever book otherwise. There's like no reason to, right? Like it's walking distance from home, but I would always be curious what it's like. So one was Hotel Rendezvous Hotel, or whatever it's called. And from the outside, it looks pretty grand, but on the inside, it's pretty old. But it does have a nice view. It's just that we had really bad rain, so the windows were kind of dirty, so it wasn't good for photography. And the other one, this one was really nice, and there's one room with a balcony. I'll have to go back because for some reason I couldn't get the time-lapse mode on my A7 to work. I really wanted to take a sunrise and sunset time-lapse there. Was the Doubletree, Hilton Doubletree on Flinders Street. It looks onto Flinders Street Station. So you get this really cool, like you see the clock tower of Flinders Street and then South Bank in the background. So again, this is on the newsletter. It's like if you click on the blog link, the photos are up on that one.
Would you recommend that for other photographers wanting to get some cool shots?
Yeah, so I was going to actually talk to the Hilton. So other photographers in Melbourne got invited to like a sunset shoot there, just to promote it on their Instagram stories and stuff. And the Melbourne City Instagram profiles, like the media people, they were going to put me in touch with them. But as with all these things, like COVID happened, and then it all went by the side. So I just thought, well, I'll just book a room since I've got extra free credit. Just to see. But that room wasn't available, the one with the balcony on the weekend. So I think I'll definitely go back. And the weather was kind of ordinary as well. So as the weather, like, probably won't do it in winter, but once it starts coming into spring, I'll probably actually book it again just to go and just spend 24 hours because I did not book it well. I had work in the morning, social commitments, and then the next day I had other stuff as well. So it just wasn't particularly good from a photography point of view, but it was nice to just chill out and sleep and all that stuff.
So it sounds like if you're looking for photography, get the balcony room, but when you have free time and good weather. Yeah,
well, the balcony room just totally eliminates your reflections, right? Like most of the time, it was just draw curtains. Like I had the lens skirt stuck up onto the actual glass so that it didn't have any reflections. But yeah, there's something. The A7 had a firmware update because it doesn't actually have the time lapse mode, so I had to update it last time. But for whatever reason, it took like 5 shots and shut off. I tried it somewhere else.
Sounds like DJI.
Huh?
It sounds like a DJI drone. Turn it on. Firmware update time.
Well, no, because it didn't need the firmware update. It just didn't have the function. So I had to update it for that. And then last time it ran out of memory. So I had it set to RAW plus JPEG, and I forgot to format the memory card. So it literally had space for like 5 shots because they're also 50 megapixels. So, yeah. So that's been my random staycations around Melbourne,
Nice.
which, I would say it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, if you live in Melbourne, you'd recommend it?
I think wherever you are, I would recommend it because it's like, when you went to Crown with your parents. Like, I'm sure, like, I'm curious as to what it's like.
Yeah.
There's no point in going there. There's far better places that are newer, but you'll forever be curious.
Yeah, because always looking at the Crown building going, wonder what that's like. And sometimes it's just nice to go check it out.
I walk past that DoubleTree all the time coming home from work or just going to getting the groceries. And I'm like, that's what it's like. And it's quite nice. And you can also recommend it to people. Like if people are coming going, hey, we want to be close by or we want to view or whatever, you can kind of go, that place is good for this. This place is good for if you have kids. I mean, obviously that would require to figure out if it is, but
I don't know, that's sharp objects.
Yeah. So how's Perth?
Nice. Got to say, it's been nice to come back to Perth. The simplest thing, which sounds kind of like the boring thing people talk about, i.e. the weather, but man, so nice. Literally been here. It's like clear, blue, sunny sky, warm day, go to the beach. Had some friends like send photos of, hey, this is what Melbourne's looking at. I'm like, it's a little bit different here. It's funny how much difference that makes.
You're lying.
I know, for me personally, get up on a really nice day, just I'm a generally better person. So that's been one of my favorite things about Perth. And I noticed that was similar over in California as well, actually. They had a very similar sort of temperament. Yeah. It's pretty much, even though I was there in winter, it was still, nice, sunny / cold.
See, LA gets that, but San Francisco, where you were, definitely doesn't.
Palo Alto does. San Francisco itself has weird little microclimate systems going on. But
Palo Alto closer to like LA style.
A little bit further down. But yeah, it was great. Really nice. Cycling around everywhere all the time.
Because San Fran, the day I landed last time, looked amazing. Then we went for a walk and it was gale force winds.
Yeah, so you can walk like multiple blocks and the weather changes as you walk across the different blocks.
Yeah, so we looked at it. We went to Golden Gate and it was gale force winds. And then the next, actually, the other days were fine. Because I flew the drone over the Bendy Street and everything else.
Nice.
That was quite cool.
Legally, of course.
I think it actually is legal. Oh yeah, I actually was registered. Like, remember my drone had the barcode and everything?
Yeah.
I actually register and do it the proper way.
I definitely did do that. Yes.
DJI drone, all the demo shots for half the websites are from San Francisco. There's one that's
must be all right.
Flying over like the pyramid building, the Transamerica building or whatever. So it's a top-down view of that. So that's definitely way past whatever the height restrictions in Australia are. And it's a top-down shot of that at twilight. So just to demo the low light capabilities. And it's actually pretty good.
Well, currently my drone is still in the US, so I do need to repatriate it.
Interesting thing I found out. You can actually fly drones in Melbourne over cities and people. There are now insurance companies that will insure you. And if you do, it's like $50 to get a license for like a permit for a shoot in Melbourne. So there's people who've legally done it by flying over.
That's worth it.
Yeah. So
I have to look into this.
Yeah. So I also have to do that at some point. But yeah, random thing I found out. What else was I going to ask you about? So, what's it like finally being a specialist operating like a boss?
Yeah, well, something new. So those shiny new letters that I got, i.e. So I finished my official medical training after 15 years, or whenever that is. But officially, as a consultant ophthalmologist, I get to practice. And finally,
spell the word ophthalmologist.
Eye surgeon. That's what I go with. Simple. But yeah, it's nice to finally be able to say, yeah, officially sort of finished that entire train, and now actually, being able to use that to practice independently, which is nice. It's
Is it what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, it's quite enjoyable actually. It definitely, it's weird because part of it is kind of, it's not that much different to what you were doing before. You get a little bit of extra in the sense of responsibility, because before, you always were under somebody else and you're always sort of running things past somebody. But what I've realized is actually, even practicing as a consultant, sometimes there's interesting and weird cases and you discuss it with colleagues. So in a sense, there is some, collegiality there, and ways to get opinions from other people as well. So that's been nice to know and nice to experience.
Weirdly not what you expected.
One of the things I was a little bit, concerned about is, obviously operating after a little while. But surprisingly, it's not the first time I've sort of, taken a break from operating and come back to it. First time was, in first year when I took a year off. But this time have been doing, various surgical simulators and other things to keep my hands busy. But yeah, surprisingly managed to sort of slip back into things, fairly well. So, obviously left myself extra time, etc., and took it easy. But yeah, that was quite nice to see.
But nothing that you kind of went, wasn't expecting that when I became a boss.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I was like, it really does feel like what I was doing before, but just with me as the responsible person. I was expecting a little bit more difference or change to what I was doing before. I think that's probably the biggest unexpected thing.
I think for me, when I started, the biggest thing was, how you go to see a specialist and you can get a second opinion or whatever.
Mm.
The fact that it's called an opinion. Because one day I was just mucking around with the nurse in charge in theater, and I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to cancel all the cases. And she's like, okay. Then she got on the phone and started calling the surgeons to cancel the cases. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's like,
what? No.
Canceled. I was like, I was kidding. It's like, you said canceled. And it just kind of hit me that that's all it takes.
Mm.
Like, you are now the definitive word on, for that period of time that you're on.
Yeah.
You get to call said shots.
Mm.
Whatever it is, even if you like, it's whatever your judgment call is, because it is literally your opinion. If you think something is safe, that becomes the law for that period of time. Someone else can override you. Like, I'm sure my bosses could, but they're not on. So if I think this is dangerous, that little spidey sense mode of it is what determines it. And it kind of was like, I thought there was more to it than that, but that's, I suppose, what the experience is, going, something's not right here. Better get onto it, or that we shouldn't be doing this at like middle of the night.
Yeah.
That was, like the fact that there should be more, but there isn't. It's literally
you are it.
That struck me as really odd, and also probably because I was just, carrying on, and they took it seriously and nearly canceled like 5 cases. And also, it was barely lunchtime. I was like, are you serious? Do people do that?
Why would I do this?
Yeah. And she was like, oh, you've just started. I don't know you. I was like, yeah, also very true.
But the other nice thing has been, it's been enjoyable to get back into it as well, after a bit of a break. So yeah, that's always good to be refreshed off.
And actually, that's been the other thing. I started the recommendation from before, like how to automate the boring stuff, the Python course. I started doing it on Udemy or one of them.
Nice.
And it's fun to get back into programming, but I just realized that, man, after exams, haven't gone and learnt anything formally. Programming is not formal, obviously, but it's just something nice about acquiring a new skill.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, especially if you can have some. I wanted to do this with Duolingo and Japanese, but it's hard to make it practical unless you have some end goal in mind. And with programming, I don't really have any specific end goal, but I can kind of, the inklings are there much more than go to Japan, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, I spent like maybe a day doing it, and that was the best day. I looked through my mini journal of sorts, and it kind of goes to show, it's like, I just really enjoy learning. It's been kind of surprising, but it's just been like, yeah, it's just something little learning practical things, and practical in the sense that I can figure out little things that I'd want to do with it and build on it, sort of thing.
I think that's where I found sort of the programming thing was really good, especially over the last year, is little things that I just wanted to exist. And then making them coming to existence. And then that's kind of cool. And then the second part of it, usually you start with, well, I have no idea how to make this come into existence. Better Google it. And it's that whole learning process of how to do it.
That's the other thing with coding, right? Like, you literally need a laptop and an internet connection, and that's it. Say you wanted to, I don't know, have a rocket ship. You need the metal, you need this, and you need that. But with programming, everything exists within the world of the computer.
Yeah.
And you can build almost anything if you have the sufficient knowledge. Or it's not even that. It's, doing that tiny bit of Dart and Flutter, like the concepts kind of translate across. But it's also, that just taught me that everything in the internet and everything in programming is literally duct taping random bits of code from other people together, unless you want to go hardcore and build it from scratch. But most things there's existing things and you want to duct tape it in your way.
Well, it's like most ideas in general is just a repurposing of a combination of other ideas.
Yeah, so it's literally like, when it's called a programming language, it is exactly that, right? It's just you're trying to communicate in a specific style, trying to make a function of it. It's just, how do you give the instruction set?
And it becomes very much, can you describe a logical argument?
Yeah. So that's been, well, it's more reinforcing, I suppose. It's not been something that's surprising, but yeah, I will have to engineer a bit more time so that I can do this in between all the, so with the Ramadan thing, I'm going to restart the vlog again and for homeless people. So
maybe you could combine the vlog with programming somehow. I don't know.
No, that would just be boring. Hey, look, I'm coding.
No, I've watched coding channels to learn stuff.
Yeah, that takes a very specific kind of person, and that's not most people.
Yeah, I know. But remember, niche market.
Yeah, I don't think people are coming to a podcast called randInt to watch. I suppose maybe you are.
Well, it is Rand.
All right. Studying again at old spots.
Yeah.
Done something.
Well, the other thing that's been interesting is because I'm, I've got all my basic knowledge, that's all, doesn't disappear. I was like, I remember probably the peak of my knowledge was just after sitting exams. And a number of people have said that as well, where the peak of their broad general knowledge is just after sitting their final exams. So what I've been doing is basically just going back over all of my flashcards, which I used to study for exams, and had a very specific technique. And one of the things I was learning actually is learning how to learn.
There's a course on that on Coursera, by the way.
There's a whole bunch of really good stuff on that. I'm doing a lecture for some registrars next week on that. But from that, what I found is, just going over my old study material has been really helpful, actually. And that's something that I guess I want to maintain now. I sort of let it go to a wayside for about a year or so, but I've been picking that up. It also feels like deja vu because I was in some of these old, cafes, wineries, wherever, studying a few years back, and now I'm back at the same places with the same study card deck.
I wonder if it's like more reinforcing because you're at those places.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it feels good and bad.
I ignored all study things, but now I have to give vivas to the trainees, and I'm like, oh yeah, that old chestnut.
Yeah, there was some stuff there.
Like receptors, they do things. Yep. mRNA, second messengers. Yeah, I think it's that one.
Pfizer vaccine. I just got my dose today.
Oh, did you? Any side effects?
Well, apart from the 5G reception being amazing, not so.
Did you just get it? Like, how long has it been?
About 6 hours.
You've got about 18 to go. Then it kicks into gear.
Oh no.
But seriously, it's roughly at about 20 hours that you start seeing it. But tomorrow morning, you'll be fine.
I'll be fine.
If you start craving people's brains, it's okay. Not turning into a zombie. It's all good. Cool. I was gonna ask, so I thought we'd do a random interlude here and go to our next segment, which is random question of the week.
Well.
So my question, and since you're terrible at spontaneous answers, you've seen it already, which was, what's a recent quote that's made you stop and think?
Well, one that I have seen recently is, and I'm seeing it apply a little bit now as well to myself. It's from the Discworld series of novels. So if anybody has not heard of that, look up Terry Pratchett. The Discworld series of novels, probably one of my all-time favorite sort of entire stories / set of books. Very well written, good sort of comical kind of thing with weirdly poignant lessons built into a fantasy comedy series. But one of the quotes from there was
almost practical philosophy in comedy form.
Yeah, pretty much philosophy in comedy form. Like, really good. Yeah. I have read the entire series of books on a Nokia N82, i.e. the good old, like, tiny little phone thing.
And then you went to the iPhone. What a waste.
Anyway, read that. But one of the quotes was around, this is the exact quote, was, the trouble with having an open mind is that people will insist on coming along and trying to put things in it. And I've noticed this.
Behind the trash can, close it up.
But I've realized that sometimes that person is also me.
Yeah, so crashing your own mind.
Yeah, so sometimes, like right now, for example, I'm trying to keep my plate as free as possible. But
you do such an amazing job of that most of the time.
Yeah, terrible job of that. And recently I've been finding
it's like the perfect time to do that.
I know. It turns out when you tell people, it's great, I'm unemployed, I'm not doing anything, they're like, do you want to work here? And I mean, normally it sounds like a great thing, but sometimes when I've got a few projects on the go, sort of want to focus on some of the other projects, even though they're not formally a full-time job or a formal project, and it's just something you're exploring. It's very easy to fill up your plate with other stuff unless there's one big thing you're doing. And I have found that that also applies to other people trying to help you as well, because you've got some free time, here's some things that you can do, and genuinely trying to be helpful. But it doesn't work if you're trying to keep the plate empty.
But why are you trying to, what are you trying to do with your empty plate? Like, what are you trying to do with your empty plate?
I'm a big believer in sort of a serendipity. And I think sometimes...
But isn't that what you're describing, serendipity? People coming along and offering you things?
Yes, you have to be careful with what you say yes to. And one of the books I've read, was around, what was it?
No?
It's a no unless it's a hell yes kind of thing.
I actually have that book. Like, it's actually called Hell Yeah or No.
There you go.
Yeah, I ended up buying the physical copy because I'm going through a phase of going through and buying physical copies of what I found to be monumental books. So one was the 4-Hour Work Week. I've got it on Kindle and pirated PDF and stuff, but I wanted the hardcover just because it changed how I looked at time management and stuff. And the Hell Yeah and No, it's got really good essays. One of the interesting one was about, how it basically was saying, I think about certain things, like whatever it is, like say, for example, your open mind quote, right? And how you're describing it. And people will read quotes and go, "Oh man, they put it so well. I wonder how they ever came up with something so brilliantly," right? And so Derek Sivers, who wrote the book, was basically like, "It's like, oh, I typed my version of it, and I put it online, and I typed something else that I thought was fairly obvious, and people came up and went, 'Oh wow, that's amazing. How did you ever come up with that?'" Right? So it's just different things resonate with different people. Like the thing that you think, oh god, that's my. I gave my mom one of the Google smart speakers, and now she insists on calling on that versus the phone. And because I've got like 10 of them around the house, they all go off at once.
What I'm hearing is you need an iPhone. Anyway.
Yeah, because FaceTime is so much better.
It's magical.
But yeah, so it was the basic premise was that whatever you like, if you're going to create and actually share it, whatever seems obvious to you might actually seem amazing to other people. People that wrote that amazing thing probably thought it was like the most obvious thing in the world. So I'm pretty sure Terry Pratchett went around going, "Hey, Rincewind is a wizard who doesn't really want to be a wizard. He's kind of not that good, but he's actually really strong." So on and so forth. Like, wouldn't that be funny? And it turns out that it was, but people kind of never thought of it that way.
Yep. Yeah. That's interesting how one person's, I guess, random idea is somewhat well valued by a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, genuinely, I suppose you have to have a breadth of knowledge and some ability to take something and apply it or change it in a certain way to make it. It's the whole, Apple versus Microsoft thing. Apple gets a product, packages it nicely so that most people go, "Oh wow, this is magical," versus Android like hack this bit together with that to make it work.
Take these things together.
Yeah, like programming, Apple doesn't really show you the Xcode version of things. It shows you the pretty version of things. Yeah. So I think the quote that's made me kind of really stop and think about it was the Balaji Srinivasan guy who appeared on the Tim Ferriss podcast. And he started a newsletter called 1729. And it's basically these little tasks that you can complete and get like $100 in crypto. And the podcast itself, you can actually submit your own tasks. And it's about trying to change the media landscape and all that stuff. Cool. But his point was, if programming and code is how you give instructions, is how you program computers. So code is what programs computers. Media is what programs people.
Okay.
And
interesting.
It kind of struck a chord because, we started the podcast and the newsletter for me personally and like social media and all that stuff. And it's kind of been subconsciously true, and that flicked it into from subconscious to conscious, if that makes sense. Because if you think about it, from every society going back, say Nazi Germany or even earlier, it's why is there propaganda, right? And also, why was a part of why America was always seen in this sort of golden light was all the action films had American heroes, right? Like they would go and they'd save other people, and that's like the whole Superman concept. Like the Superman itself was like invented by I think 2 Jewish artists after the
really
America went and helped. Yeah, like it was literally, that's why it's red and blue, like the stripes of the flag. That's what the color scheme comes from. It was this representation of taking on this great evil and winning against odds. And this almost infallible character, with a fatal flaw, which may be more on the exposed territory at the moment. And also, I'm reading this book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And one of the interesting things is at the very early advent of writing, writing didn't get disseminated because the palace or whatever the power structures wanted to control writing. And also people just didn't see what the point of it was, to make the masses have access to it. And they did it for account keeping and like, AKA who paid their taxes and not, and to spread propaganda. That was literally the 2 uses. That's all they could find of all ancient texts. So you kind of go, it's kind of true. And it seems to bear out in history. Media is what programs people.
It's essentially the sharing of a message.
And a
with an
sharing of a
amplifier.
message, and something that we've argued about in the past, which is like the structure of a language determines what you can think about it, right? So
Yep.
one of the things that this Srivanasan guy was, the Balaji guy was talking about was, there's this, if you watch a movie, right, and it has like Corporation X doing something, you can almost tell that the corporation is going to be evil and they're going to be trying to do something and the heroes have to stop them.
Yep.
And sometimes the government's good or bad or da da da, but the heroes have to take down the corporation usually. Like, that's great, unless the corporations are trying to do good stuff, and say the
Like
NGO.
Facebook.
Yeah, well, okay, Facebook's probably the worst example, but like, it's always like, say, if it's environmental, like it's Greenpeace is trying to save the earth and Microsoft's trying to kill it, right? And that's intentionally a bit of an apples to oranges, because Bill Gates is probably trying to save the earth as well, And it was interesting because he was trying to say, is like, what happens if you start to make movies where the NGO's evil or has this ulterior motive or something like that? Because his thing is, not everything is clean cut. And once he said that, I was kind of thinking about this other book I was reading, which talks about how the whole genetically modified argument and how that comes about. And one of the things was, a few years ago, Monsanto, or one of the big corporations, brought out these seeds that were disease resistant and everything. But once you plant them, they will not populate with the native plant species. So you have to go buy a second lot of seeds from them.
Yeah.
I was like, well, if that, like, what happens if something goes wrong? Like, oh, your crops die. This is terrible, right? But what I didn't realize was they actually made normal seeds that people could cultivate, and it would just be more strengthened, drought resistant, didn't need pesticides, right? But the NGOs and the environmental groups went, hey, it's going to spread in the wild, and it's going to, like, everything's going to be genetically modified.
They want only one wave.
Yeah, and so then the actual company, well, the companies were actually trying to do the whole, it's kind of like what AstraZeneca tried to do with the AZ vaccine, right? They actually are not making a profit on it. They were like, okay, just take it. This is just doing a social good. Because at the end of the day, people are in companies, and companies also have to have a public image and everything else. And everyone, like, just like you want to be a good person, so do companies, to a certain extent, they still have to generate profit. So there were actually big pharma companies and agricultural companies going, hey, like golden rice is really the best example, where it's a fortified rice that has all the vitamins that the third world really needs to get their population going. But there's been such a scare campaigns against GMOs that it never got, like, it's literally, they've given away the patent, but no one's willing to do it because there's been enough environmental regulations, right? But in the case of these killer plants that were going to then spread in the wild, so they went, all right, we'll make a version that cannot do that, right? And we'll give it away at really cheap prices again, but you're going to have to come back every year. And they spun that. So either way, the big corporation was going to lose. And then I'm sure they're tearing their head out going, hey,
what do you want?
We're trying to do the right thing. This was like all the other, like, I'm sure they've done lots of bad stuff. Like Monsanto is not exactly a good company, and it's like in all aspects, but they were trying to do one good thing. But the evil corporation narrative is so strong that it got skewed one way or the other.
Well, I think it kind of comes down to regulation is really hard, especially of new things. And I'm seeing this in, the AI stuff, because at the end of the day, it's new. We don't know where it's going, and we don't know what's going to happen with it. So it's a very careful balance between stifling innovation, which could, by stifling that innovation, i.e., encouraging those drought-resistant seeds, etc., to get out, which could help a lot of people, and thereby not giving them is actually killing a lot of people. But balancing that against the fact that, well, we don't know. Like, what if it turns out to be a really bad idea and you can't rein it back in, similar to AI stuff? What if generalized AI turns out to be a really bad idea and Skynet turns out to be really hard to rein back in?
Yeah. But I would propose that instead of it being a balanced argument, we auto go to this negative, right? We go to Skynet and generalized AI being bad, because that is
thing. Well, people are generally more, you want to do no harm, right? I mean, the medical thing, do no harm. So people, we don't like too much change at the end of the day.
Well, it's the whole Google do no evil versus do good.
Yeah.
And people have reacted to just the change in statement there, right? But it's kind of like, no one talks about Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan movie. Like, there was generalized AI and they were just generally helpful. And everyone's like, cool, whatever. It's like Google Assistant. Not generalized AI, but it's just generally helpful. It's listening and privacy issues galore. But I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's like generally useful, right? But kind of become quite adapted to that version of it. It's like, oh, no, but something else will kill us. Like, well, that's the thing that was like trying to help,
Yeah.
And also, I think the other big thing is for generalized AI, like the whole AI argument, AI would have to have a need, like a desire. And I'm not sure, like, unless you train it to have a desire, it's going to have a desire. Like, does that make sense?
Well, it depends, because it's kind of like, for example, and this is where the don't know what you don't know. But if you have a system, i.e., say a biological system, that the winner is the one that has the most of them, i.e., people, then what gets optimized for is really hard to guess, because you think, people would optimize to be as happy as possible. Actually, no. Humanity's kind of just optimized for the most number of humans as possible, which makes sense.
We just survive. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to get sidetracked onto very different topics. So
it sounds great.
It's also gone on for long enough. It's been like didn't you order Uber Eats or something?
Well, I ordered a pie from downstairs like an hour ago. I think it's coming. Damn it. Okay.
So moving on to Rex section. So this one, the basis for this is since the podcast is called randInt, I actually want to have a segment that goes and explores the impact of random events on the world or something, right? And I was a bit too lazy. Okay, it's Ramadan. So I went with what's a random thing that's impacted your life that in retrospect, it was just this thing that you did or something happened, but it altered something significant afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you were thinking about it. That's what you're thinking about at the beginning. So you go first.
Yeah. All right. Well, initially I was jumping around between a few. So I will pick the JMTM one, but I'm going to pick a very specific angle of that.
Well, to recap what JMTM was.
So JMTM, Journal of Mobile Technology in Medicine, that was my first sort of exploration of doing a project. In medicine, normally, you go through, you do your medical training and exams and stuff, and that's about it. But one of the things that I was always interested in is mobile technology. And I was doing a lot of research stuff at the time as well, and came out of the simple need of, back in like 2012, was doing some research in mobile tech, but there wasn't really a good place to publish it. So like, why don't I just start a journal? And went down that route of, okay, let me learn how to. And one of the things that I learned from that is I came across a whole bunch of stuff about different types of startups, and started reading around startups from there. And I think that was a bit of a random thing, which I wasn't expecting to read about startups. I was very much expecting to read about, well, how do you start a journal? But it led to other problems like, well, how do you put a team together? Oh, I have no money. So how do I make this work as cheaply as possible with the biggest impact as possible? And then I ended up reading a whole bunch of startup related resources. So for me, that was a bit of a random start, which then got me started down the rabbit warren of exploring startups.
Fair enough. Yeah. Actually, looking back, that probably
it was never designed as a startup. It was more just need somewhere to publish stuff.
Yeah.
Journals.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I think for me personally, around that time was when I launched that. Remember that cable website?
Yeah.
So it was roughly around that same time. Actually, it was, because I think you woke me up at like 10 o'clock at night going, hey, we're launching, something's not right with the design. Can you edit this? And I was like,
that sounds right.
You woke me up again. And I remember because it was like 3 times in a row. I can't remember it was Ramadan around then as well. But I was like, God damn it. This was really good.
See, startups, there is no hours. That's what I learned. Get shit done.
I'm going to have to bleep that again.
Ah, damn it. So good.
Yeah. So like the cable website was probably my first lesson in actually proving that the 4-hour work stuff was real. You could order a bunch of cables for $100. You could either buy 3 from Apple or 100 from the supplier and then sell the excess. So I only needed 3. And that worked. But yeah, I mean, I could change my answer, but I think I'm going to go with my one just because it's truly one of the more random a sequence of events that really changed a lot, which was years and years ago in high school, when SBS late night TV was, off limits to young children. I turned it on one day and there was like a cartoon playing, and I was like, 9:30 at night. Oh yeah, there's giant robots fighting, and the show was
how can you go wrong?
Yeah, well, I was like, I was a teenager, barely a teenager. And the show was Neon Genesis Evangelion, which for anyone who's watched the anime goes very quickly from giant robots fighting to like, holy moly, what the hell? What sort of psychology trip is this, right?
What is life? Why am I here?
It gets heavy. It gets into like basically character, personality, destructiveness. Like it has a lot in there for something that's like aimed at young adults at 20-minute episodes. It packs a lot. It has like religion, psychology, everything else. And so this sequence of events retrospectively makes sense, but at the time it obviously had no bearing. This was when I was living in the Gold Coast, and this is back in the days of VHS tapes. So I watched a random episode. It was halfway through the series. I was like, okay, I get nothing about this, the characters or whatnot. But the series became so popular all of a sudden in SBS that they actually, and I even remember their ad campaign, which was like, Evangelion on Thursdays, going from episode 7 onwards, but also on Sundays or like Mondays, restarting from episode 1. Confused? You should be, just like Evangelion. It was literally, that was the ad campaign. Because halfway through it got popular, then people wanted to watch the previous ones, but they couldn't.
Wait,
so
what?
They started it. So they had these 2 separate things. So it would finish so that the people currently watching it wouldn't get pissed off, but the new ones could also watch. But at the time, I couldn't watch it because it was way later. When they did the repeats, it was like close to midnight. What ended up happening was the city council library got the VHS tapes. So I could watch it. But they were always on loan. So I'd seen enough of the episodes that I kind of got the story, except for a couple of the things. So, and the library also had like internet access. I didn't have internet at home. So I started finding all these websites that had all the Evangelion stuff, like all the synopses and stories and theories. And it's kind of a really messy, a bit kind of open-ended interpretation like this, especially the first version of the ending was really low budget and left a lot to kind of, it's up to you to decide sort of thing. And I went down the rabbit hole of learning everything from the web. That was the first time I kind of Googled, actually Google was just starting around then. And that led to me getting obsessed with this anime series because it had everything about like a lot of stuff on religion, a lot of stuff on philosophy, and a lot of stuff on just like the meta version of life, like what is life, like those kind of questions. It's kind of like the Terry Pratchett thing. It took something that is kind of hard philosophy, you think about old people and priests thinking about this stuff, and turn it into a cartoon. And that was my gateway drug to all these kind of things. But the more specific example is because I started looking up stuff on the interwebs, I was kind of like, oh, what is this interweb? And then I started going, hey, that website looks really cool. I should make my own. And this is when you lead Cool 3D. So there was like a magazine used to come with the demo CDs, of apps and stuff, because
of course,
like the CDs that had the So
with
one of
the freeware or the shareware.
Yeah, the shareware. So this was there's an app called program called You Lead Cool 3D. all it did was you could type text and you could 3D rotate it. It would make it look 3D. Like, it's very basic now, but back then I was like, whoa. So GeoCities was a thing. So I built this website that was just random pictures of Evangelion, like robots, like just linked together and with animated background. It's like Netscape Composer and like, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And I was very proud of it. So I showed this friend of mine, this guy who was a few more years senior in high school. And he was kind of into the whole web design thing. So I was like, oh, what's your opinion? And he just laughed. He's like, you built that? And I was like, is that a good laugh or a bad laugh? And he's like, and he just kind of went, yeah, look, and you could tell that he was a bit disappointed. Let's just call it that. And this guy, I would genuinely say, looking back at the stuff he was talking about, was way ahead of the curve. Like, this is early 2000s. He was talking about flat design, like what material design and iOS was doing. He was, and he was a guy who had a knack for these things. His name was Nathan Donnelly. And I just specifically remember that moment because I'd read enough about the web. I'd seen enough good websites, or at least enough variety of websites to kind of go, that's a good one, that's a bad one. I don't know why. And I picked out this random book called Web 2.0 and like devoured it cover to cover. It's like a kind of it takes a website, it dissects down what's good about it. It talks about HTML and CSS and all like the nerdy, really dry stuff, but in a practical way.
Oh.
And I went nuts redesigning my website. And I showed him like 2 weeks later. It's like, oh, that's what I've done. And you could there was like he didn't criticize it. There was no laugh. There was nothing. It was like a silent nod, like, okay, that's actually quite nice. And that led me down the rabbit hole of learning everything about, like everything I know about the web and all the stuff about in Team Anesthesia that I'm doing is from that specific moment of watching an anime, not having not being able to watch it. So then going to the library, not finding the VHS tapes, going on the internet, then getting curious enough about this anime that I was obsessed with to try and build a website. And this random kid laughing at me, essentially. And like JMTN. Like the reason I designed that was, again, based on literally what I learned from that one. Like the anime was the trigger point. And that is a random sequence of everything that I do. And half the stuff I get asked to design is literally from that one little moment.
I think that's very fulfilling for randInt, since we started with Neon Genesis Evangelion, which I figured would be like, oh yeah, it's a bit of a mind messing thing. From that, I learned websites. Wait, what? And design.
But like, it's a very tangential set of events, but I can put down the motivation for learning all those things based on that series of events. And also,
so what I'm hearing is the moral of the story is you should watch Neon Genesis Evangelion if you haven't watched.
It is not safe for children. It is not safe for work.
It's not safe for most people.
If you really want to go a mix of WTF, but also, wow, those are profound questions if I really take them seriously. And also, man, the main character is a whiny bitch. Like, yeah, if you want those kind of things together, but it genuinely, for a cartoon, asks some pretty hard questions.
And if you had enough of hard questions, watch One Piece instead. You go, funny, and then next episode.
All right. So that's all 3 segments done.
Well.
All right.
That's a long-ass podcast again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are a bit late on this one.
This is true. It's a catch-up.
Any parting thoughts? Any? When are you coming back to Melbourne?
May. Start off.
Any big things happening between now and then?
No, actually. Enjoying just doing a couple of weeks of clinical work, just getting my hands back into that. So that's kind of nice, actually.
Have you got any time after, like, to hang around Perth, or you're finishing and then
doing a little bit of a weekend away at this upcoming weekend at one of my old study spots, which I'll be going back to study at.
Is that random cabin in the woods thing?
Yeah, it's like a cabin on top of a hill where at the right time of year there's like fog in the valley, low-lying cloud, and I've got my new drone, so that should be good. And then after that, just catching up with people in Perth before coming back.
Nice. I'm trying to
So I
think
need to scam another vaccine at some point. So gotta work that out.
Sure, it's doable. It's Perth. It's pretty chill. They're like, here, have 3 more if you want. They are saying that you might need a booster shot, so get 3.
Oh, right. Damn. What about yourself?
Nothing specific. I'm just trying to get into the full groove of Ramadan and make it through to Eid. I think the biggest thing is for me to try and carve out some time to, like, we can record it, but I got to edit all the stuff and put it out there, or actually start thinking about building a team around it. Like, I always put it as a later problem, as a, it's not big enough a project, but it's also very limited by me. I haven't edited the last 3 episodes videos because I've been busy.
Yeah.
So it is coming up. It's the realization that maybe this is as big as it can get because it's actually hitting some hardline things. Because
sounds like a job for Upwork.
Yeah, like all these things are tiny little things that I do in my spare time. But what happens when you have no spare time?
Yeah. And
so
right.
It's my pre-contemplation of needing to go from it's just a one-man team to actually maybe starting to build out a team. But other than that, I've got some leave coming up in May. So I actually have to take that off officially and then actually plan to do something on it. So I'm looking forward to that because that'll be 2 weeks off. Okay.
That's my dinner munchies, everyone. Well, that sounds like opportune time.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, instead, unless you guys want to hear Chandra go nyam, nyam, nyam.
Don't worry. There will be a whole episode of nyam, nyam, nyam.
Yeah, because they can't listen to episode 1 already.
But we got such great feedback on that.
All right. So if you've gotten to this end, wow, you've done well. But like and subscribe and stuff to the podcast.
Buttons.
Yeah, there must be buttons somewhere on the screen.
Yeah.
But also, leave us a message. I really want a message. So put any message. Come on.
Just like even a potato.
Well, can't you get your sister to leave us a message?
This is true. I will annoy someone to leave a message.
Yeah, I just want to have, I just want to see what it does on the app. Mainly I just want to, I've done it to myself, but it also comes up with a message, you can't leave yourself a message unless you do the specific sequence and then it kind of bypasses it. But I just want to have a message. So I've got a little segment of audio. I want to play that and then the message.
Well,
all right.
Views are we at now? Let's see. How many listens are we at now?
I don't know, man. You have the proper back-end access. I can only look at some of them.
This is true. Oh, here we go. We're at 231 plays. Well, there we go.
Don't you have the Spotify subscriber counts and I don't know how many subscribers and all that?
Same. We have lots of listens. Yay.
Okay, with that, we better sign off because this has been incredibly long.
Indeed.
Oh, and if anyone has any feedback, podcast@photosbyraffi.com is the email address. It'll go to both of us.
Please teach us.
Yeah, since we're literally just carrying on. Have you liked this one versus the early episodes, which were very much more random, but with lots of Chandra pausing, going, let me think about it, and never answering. Okay, you better eat. I better go. Adios. Till next time.
Sounds good. See ya.
Hey.